yet again for another build video, and in this edition we're actually going to be upgrading my mom's PC. For a while now she's been using an old iMac from around 2012. To give the machine credit, it performed pretty well for the time, but of course now, 5 years later, even after various upgrades, it's definitely showing signs of its age. It takes a really long time to start up, to start any programs, to do anything. We see that as a huge problem, so we are going to help her out with that. And we're not surprising her. She knows about this. Unlike my dad, we surprised him with a new gaming PC. You can find that up in the cards. That was a really fun experience. This is not a gaming PC. This will have a GTX 1050 Ti in there, so of course it will be pretty capable in that regard. Usually in these PC build videos, I start with some of the more important components first, but in this one, I think it's more important to start things off with the case, because the case is an integral part of all the decision making that went into the rest of the parts of the build. And the case that we have today is the Fractal Design Node 202. This is actually the first case that I've reviewed as one of these build videos that actually almost fits in the frame with me. That's how tiny this thing is. It actually rivals a lot of gaming consoles, at least in size. It's a little bit bigger, but honestly, compared to a lot of PC cases out there, this is definitely more entertainment center or small desktop friendly. 10.2 liters. For comparison, the Xbox One, the original Xbox One, was a little over 7 liters. So this is bigger than that, but not by much. So it's definitely going to stay out of the way. That's really all she needs. She doesn't need anything fancy, no flashing lights. She needs something that's going to perform well, boot quick, and then just stay out of the way. And this is a perfect case for that. For a processor, we decided to go with this Ryzen 5 1600. For those of you more familiar with Intel, this is comparable to a high-end Intel i5. In gaming applications, these are not going to perform as well as their Intel counterparts for about the same price. However, they are going to perform much better in applications that leverage more cores. This has 6 cores and 12 threads. To keep that processor cool, we are going with a CryoRig C7. Now, I already know what you're thinking. The 1600 already comes with a cooler. Why would you buy a cooler that's only going to perform marginally better than the one that comes with the processor? This case will actually not support the stock cooler, the Wraith Spire cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 1600. You need to get something even more low profile than that. So for that reason, we're using the C7. Unfortunately, these CryoRig processors do not come with a compatible bracket because the Ryzen CPUs use a different chipset than existing processors. So you need a different adapter that's going to allow this cooler to be mounted to that motherboard. And if you have purchased both a Ryzen processor and a CryoRig cooler, then they will send you one of these upgrade kits, and that is going to be mounted to this ASRock B350 Mini ITX motherboard. Obviously, only Mini ITX motherboards are going to fit in this case. This has built-in Wi-Fi, which was really important. You have to be very careful in selecting parts if you want them to fit in such a small case. This is going to work great. It does provide a little bit of overclocking headroom, but with this cooler and the amount of space we're dealing with inside of the case, thermal headroom is obviously not going to be very forgiving, so I don't imagine we'll be able to do a lot of overclocking, but the potential is there if we're able to squeeze a little bit of juice out of the processor. And we all know how much Ryzen CPUs love fast RAM. So for that reason, we got this one stick of 16 gigs, 3200 megahertz. This is going to be more than enough for what she needs for the time being. Obviously, this motherboard comes with 2 slots. So in the future, if for whatever reason she needs to upgrade to 32, there is an extra slot available. And we know these AMD processors do not have their own onboard graphics like the Intel counterparts. With the Intel processors, you can do Minecraft and YouTube, those kinds of things. But with AMD, you don't have that option. You have to get your own discrete graphics card. So we got this GTX 1050 Ti, 4 gigs of VRAM. This is a mini card. It's, the gigabyte generic 1050 Ti. And what's great about this card is that it doesn't need power from the power supply. It gets all the juice that it needs from the motherboard itself, from the PCIe slot. And the fewer cables we have to route in this case, the easier our build is going to be. And for storage, obviously, the name of the game is speed. So to that end, we went with currently, at least at the consumer level, the fastest form factor when it comes to drives, which are these PCIe NVMe drives. This is a WD Black 256 gig M.2 solid state drive. And these are incredibly fast, obviously much faster than a hard drive, even faster than a standard SSD. This is going to house the operating system as well as a few programs. So turning on or off or updating the system or opening her most used programs is going to happen lightning fast. I think she's going to be absolutely blown away by the speed of this drive. Additionally, I mentioned that she stores a ton of pictures of the grandkids on her computer, so she needs a lot of storage space. To that end, we got her this 4 terabyte Seagate Barracuda drive, 7200 RPM, so this should be more than enough. And again, some of you may realize that this case does not support 3.5-inch drives. There is room in this case for two 2.5-inch drives, but there is no room for a 3.5-inch drive natively. However, we do have a workaround in place that's going to allow us to mount this 3.5-inch drive in this computer. The case can have up to 2 120mm fans installed underneath where the graphics card goes. And again, because we're using this mini graphics card, we're not using all of that real estate that's available to us inside the case. So instead of putting a fan in the other portion of the bay where the graphics card is supposed to go, I actually got these adapters, this adapter that's going to allow us to put a 3.5-inch drive in the Node 202. Honestly, yeah, this might all be overkill. It definitely is overkill, but it's not going to need to be upgraded for a long time to come, and I think she's going to be amazed at the overall speed and just general snappiness of this new machine. So without further ado, let's get into the build.
It's the future. The war with the cybernetics has reduced the former cities of Earth into a few filthy underground outposts of starving humans who fight for their right to exist. stacked neatly for disposal. We were never more than fuel to them, to power their machines. Some say this is a battle we can't win. I'm counting on you.
Overall, the build went pretty good. I think my expectations for how time-consuming this was going to be were pretty much right on par. So there's a little bit of trial and error. No matter how much planning you do, you're going to have to pull some parts out and put them back in. I didn't really capture that much in the footage. I really just captured a best-case scenario of putting the build together. So hopefully you appreciated that, and this provided some sort of insight. But I did want to also attach some numbers to this build, because it's one thing to see a new computer and just know that it's faster, and it's another thing entirely to actually put some numbers behind it. Now, one thing to remember is that while I am comparing these two, the Mac is also a daily driver that gets used quite a bit. It's been bogged down by all kinds of software. The hard drive's pretty much maxed out. So this is not a brand new machine, and so keep that caveat in mind. First, let's talk about the drive speed, and that was the main focus of this build, was getting really fast boot and load times, and of course for that reason we went with the current fastest form factor, which is obviously NVMe. So numbers surrounding that were pretty exciting. For read speeds, we have 1,893 megabytes read and 699, essentially 700 megabytes a second for write, which is extremely fast, especially when we compare it to the brand new hard drive which we put in there, which is still probably much faster than whatever she's using in her current machine. So for read speeds on that, we have 191 megabytes per second for read speed, and for write we have 168, which is still pretty quick. Obviously nothing compared to the speeds we're getting with that solid state drive. I did try to overclock the machine, but unfortunately, as I anticipated, the small cooler in combination with the compact case meant that we just didn't have the thermal headroom to do any overclocking. Even running it at stock speed, I ran Prime 95 for about a half hour, and it was peaking right at about 80 degrees Celsius. So yeah, I could probably turn the dial a little bit, and I would see obviously the temperature go up, but for what she's using it for, the 5% performance increase you may get in tandem with the increased system temperatures, frankly, aren't really worth it. So we kept it at stock speed, and even then it still crushed the benchmarks. Running Cinebench, we have a CPU score of 1,135, which completely crushed the score of the Mac, which was a measly 299. I also ran Geekbench on these two machines for both the processor and graphics computations. We're talking 3,985 for a single core speed for the new machine, and on the old Mac we have a score of 3,589, which in real world practice I don't think you'd really notice much of a difference for single core performance. But obviously when we take into account the fact that this new processor has 6 cores and 12 threads, when you get into applications that can leverage all of those threads, now you see a much bigger difference, and that's where the 17,240 multi-core score comes for the new PC and the measly 8,773 score for the old Mac. Now, as far as graphics, even though we're using a low to mid-range GPU in the new PC, this still wiped the floor with the old Macintosh, because that old Mac is running an AMD graphics card. It's an ATI Radeon 6770M, I believe. And that's really not a great graphics processor, especially if you're going to be using this for gaming. We see that it scored it was touching 100 frames a second basically in OpenGL on the new PC, and less than half that on the old Mac at just 43, essentially 44 frames a second. And moving back over to Geekbench, we see probably the largest contrast between these two machines, and that was measuring OpenCL performance. But it's still fun to point out that the Mac only scored about 5,700 on this test, and then the Mac, I had to double check the scores here, but it scored 84,000. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you appreciated this video or found it insightful or otherwise enjoyable, then go ahead and leave a like, and also consider subscribing so you know when our future videos come out. We have a a build video coming out. It's going to be really cool. It's a completely white build, and it's all AMD parts. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also check out our previous build videos here, and also other product reviews, headsets and controllers, things of that nature. And also I run giveaways every month. This one's wrapping up here in the next few days, so don't forget to enter that. I have a really cool one going on in December, so make sure you're subscribed and that you watch that video description for giveaways coming down the road. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. And this processor is going to do a great job of